Hey everyone, welcome back to Mindful English. I'm Sera, and I'm sitting here with Liam.
Hey everyone, good to be here.
Liam, have you ever seen those ads that promise you can master English in 30 days?
All the time. And because we are so desperate to be fluent, we completely buy into that illusion. We think we need to tear down our old lives and start over with extreme intensity.
We really do. We think that success requires a 100% improvement overnight. If we want to learn English, we have to go all out. We try to wake up at 4 a.m., memorize 50 words a day, and study grammar for 3 hours straight. We treat learning like a sprint to the finish line.
But what actually happens when people try to force that kind of massive 100% improvement?
Biology takes over. It is completely unsustainable. You might feel like a superhero on Monday and Tuesday, but by Thursday, the mental fatigue sets in. You inevitably burn out. You skip a day, the guilt crushes you, and you completely give up.
And you walk away thinking, I just don't have the talent for languages.
Which is a complete tragedy, because it has nothing to do with talent. It's just bad math. And today, we want to talk about the antidote to that burnout. We are talking about the 1% rule, the aggregation of marginal gains. And here's what I'm going to show you. How the worst cycling team in history became world champions by improving just 1% at a time. And more importantly, how your brain physically rewires itself when you study just 15 minutes a day instead of 3 hours once a week.
Let's talk about why small beats big every single time.
The best way to understand the 1% rule is to look at a real-world case study that completely revolutionized sports science. Liam, tell them about the British cycling team.
This story is incredible. For over 100 years, British cyclists were, to put it politely, incredibly mediocre. Since 1908, they had won almost nothing. They had never won the Tour de France. In fact, their performance was so poor that top European bicycle manufacturers actually refused to sell them gear because they didn't want their brand associated with a losing team.
That is brutal. So, when they hired a new performance director named Dave Brailsford, what did he do? Did he scream at the athletes and demand they practice 15 hours a day?
No, he didn't demand a 100% improvement in anything. He knew that was impossible. Instead, he decided to completely break down the entire sport into microscopic pieces. His philosophy was simple. If we can look into every single component of riding a bike and improve each tiny detail by just 1%, those small gains will compound into a massive victory.
And they got obsessed with the details. They didn't just redesign the bike seats for 1% more comfort. They started to swap out the athletes' massage gels for ones that helped muscle recovery slightly faster. They hired a surgeon to teach the riders the best way to wash their hands so they wouldn't catch a cold during competition.
They even figured out exactly what type of mattress and pillow gave each specific rider the best night of sleep, and they brought those pillows to every hotel on the tour. They made hundreds of tiny 1% changes. To an outsider, washing your hands differently seems completely insignificant.
But they didn't care about the critics. They decided to fiercely stick to the math, and the results were absolute magic. Because those tiny 1% improvements started to add up, the compound interest exploded. Just 5 years after Brailsford took over, the British cycling team completely dominated the 2008 Olympics. And a few years later, they won the Tour de France 5 times in 6 years.
It is the ultimate proof that a 1% daily improvement beats a 100% massive effort every single time.
But Liam, how does bicycle racing translate to the people listening to us right now? How does the 1% rule apply to speaking English?
It translates perfectly because of neuroscience. When you learn a new English phrase, your brain fires an electrical signal across a neural pathway. If you go all out and study for 6 hours straight, but then you don't study again for a week, your brain doesn't permanently store the information. It thinks it was a one-time emergency.
Right. The brain is efficient. It won't spend energy building a permanent bridge if you only cross it once.
Exactly. But if you drastically scale back your ambition, if you only study for 15 minutes, but you do it every single day, you send a completely different signal to your nervous system. Your brain says, "Oh, we use this pathway every day. We need to upgrade it."
So your brain starts wrapping that specific neural pathway in a fatty substance called myelin. Myelin acts like insulation on a copper wire. It makes the electrical signal travel faster and faster. The more you just gently chip away at your practice, the thicker the myelin gets. You literally build up the physical hardware of fluency in your brain.
And when that myelin gets thick enough, the conscious effort disappears. That is when your training finally starts to kick in automatically.
Yes, you don't have to translate in your head anymore. Because you put in the 1% every day, you built a strong foundation of muscle memory that you can safely fall back on when you are nervous in a real conversation. That tiny 15-minute daily habit will eventually pay off in ways you can't even imagine.
That is so incredibly empowering. You do not need to be a superhero to learn a language. You just need to hack your own biology.
Exactly. Let go of the fantasy of the overnight success. Stop looking for a 100% improvement. Just find your 1% improvement today.
Before we wrap up, let's look at the phrases that came up naturally. We'll break these down into 3 stages: the trap, the 1% strategy, and the biological result.
Let's start with stage 1, the trap. This is what happens when we ignore the math. We buy into the illusion of overnight success.
To buy into means to believe a compelling idea or accept a concept, even if it might be flawed. Don't buy into the hype, do your own research.
And because we believe it, we try to tear down our old routines. To tear down means to completely dismantle or destroy something to start over. They decided to tear down the old building and construct a new one.
And then we try to go all out. We use all our energy on day 1. He went all out on his first day at the gym and could barely move the next day.
But because that is unsustainable, we quickly burn out. We become completely exhausted from the stress. After working 80-hour weeks, she completely burned out.
And when you burn out, you inevitably give up. You stop trying completely. He gave up on the diet after just 2 weeks.
But then we have stage 2, the 1% strategy. This is what the British cycling team did. Coach Brailsford decided to break down the entire sport.
To break down means to separate a massive, intimidating problem into tiny, manageable pieces. Let's break down this project into smaller tasks.
He wanted to look into every single detail, meaning he investigated and analyzed everything. We need to look into why the system failed.
They even decided to swap out their old pillows. To swap out means to exchange one thing for another. I swapped out my old phone for a newer model.
And most importantly, they fiercely promised to stick to the new system, meaning they refused to abandon their plan. If you want results, you have to stick to your workout routine.
Which is exactly what language learners have to do. You have to scale back your ambitions, meaning you reduce your expectations to make them realistic. I had to scale back my goals to something more achievable.
Just 15 minutes a day. You just quietly chip away at your goals. To chip away at something means to make slow, steady progress on a large task, like chipping a piece of marble. He chipped away at the debt month by month.
And that brings us to the final stage, the biological result. If you do this, the math works. Those tiny 1% improvements start to add up. They accumulate to create a massive total result.
And chemically, you build up the myelin in your brain. You gradually increase the strength of those neural pathways.
Until one day, the fluency finally starts to kick in, meaning it becomes automatic and begins to take effect without conscious thought. The training started to kick in, and I could speak without thinking.
Because you built a reliable reflex that you can fall back on when things get tough. To fall back on means to rely on something safe when your original plan fails. When I'm nervous, I fall back on the simple phrases I know well.
And all that quiet, boring work will absolutely pay off in the end, yielding incredible results. To pay off means your effort finally produces the reward you were hoping for. Years of practice finally paid off when she won the competition.
Think about those phrases today. Which trap are you in? Are you trying to go all out and heading for burnout?
Or are you ready to scale back, chip away at your goals, and stick to a 1% daily habit?
Tell us in the comments, what is one tiny 1% habit you are going to commit to this week to improve your English?
Maybe it's 15 minutes of listening practice. Maybe it's repeating 5 phrases out loud every morning. Tell us what your 1% looks like.
And if this episode helped you see that you don't need to be a superhero, if it gave you permission to drop the intensity and trust the science, share it with someone who's been burning themselves out trying to learn too fast.
Because the truth is, consistency beats intensity every single time. You drop the fantasy of overnight success, you trust the biology, and you just put in your 1% today.
Go back and listen to some of our previous episodes too. Each one is designed to give you those natural phrases you can practice every day.
Take care of yourselves, everyone. Remember, small beats big.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.